region. Because as we know, Dune
Middle East simulator, but with cocaine. That is not funny. It's not funny. I'm not laughing. It's not funny.
Awakening is going to be divvied up into these multiple sections, which as of now, we know there is Haga Basin and then the deep...
It's spice. It's not cocaine, okay? It's a dust-filled powder that... Wait. Forest Gaming interviewed the Dune MMO developers, and from what I hear, the Dune MMO actually looking kind of good, guys. Like actually pretty good. I don't want to get my hopes up because I'll be honest with you, every single game that I have ever played that is based off of a movie is just absolutely trash. Absolutely trash. With very few exceptions. But I'm hopeful.
Welcome back. So
the mobile one, it's not going to be mobile, is it? Is it? I don't think it's mobile.
Recently I got the chance to sit down and have a chat with Dune Awakening's creator.
No, it's actually an MMO. Guys, it's kind of like Rust meets Black Desert Online. So it's supposed to be like open world PvP. Everyone's competing for resources. You're in a desert, so resources are scarce. So you have to kill other players and take their shit, right? Is kind of like I think the vibe that they're kind of going for. It's got like a faction system from what I understand at this point, where like you have to swear to one faction and then you can play with those players and try to beat the other faction. Yeah, MMO survival. Kind of like oh gosh, what's that? Oh damn it, it's on the tip of my tongue. Asmon's played a lot of it. What's the other MMO survival game that just came out, or it's about to come out? It's not Rust. Not new New World. PAX Day.
Black Reaver just resubscribed
PAX
for
Day.
10 months.
A lot like
Hey,
PAX
Blue.
Day. Kazor Black Reaver, welcome back for 10 months, man. Really appreciate that.
Director Joel
Anyway, he interviewed the director of the new Dune MMO.
We spoke in some detail about their upcoming survival sandbox MMO.
This is what it
I
looks
did my
like.
best to ask questions about some
I'll be honest, the graphics actually look playable. They're not good. They're not like super great, but I feel like they're playably good.
of the things that I've been most curious about for the game, including the general gameplay loop, like how those starting hours look and where you go from there, what types of PvE activities and points of interest we can expect to see, how PvP is going to work, both the small and large scale, what dungeons look like, the crafting and base building, and a few other things. It was about a 45-minute chat in total, and I'm going to condense that down, cutting all of the filler and the fluff.
How do I get interviews with these big ass? Bro, I need to just start reaching out to these people.
So here is what new things I've learned about Dune Awakening. My first question was, what are the opening hours like for players? Like, what sort of stuff can we expect to see and do in those first, say, 3 to 5 hours? He told me that after character creation, there's a sequence where your ship gets shot down, you crash on the planet, and wake up inside of a cave.
Whoa, spoiler, what the what?
Quote, it's like a single player, maybe 10-minute tutorial section where we teach you the basics. You'll do a little crafting, you'll learn how to hydrate because that's important in Dune. You'll chat with a character and learn about the dialogue system, and then a bit of combat and a little bit of harvesting, and that is essentially it. After that, he said you leave the instance tutorial area flying into a sandstorm, which results in you crashing once again, but now you find yourself in the Haga Basin, which is
It's Destiny? No, I don't feel like it's Destiny, guys. In Destiny, you did not loot other players. Open world PvP was not on in Destiny, okay? PvP was a joke in Destiny. I don't give a who you are. PvP was a joke in Destiny. That's just how it was. Crucible, yeah, nobody cares, okay?
Is the first major open world multiplayer portion of the game. So I asked if there's a particular area that players will arrive when first entering Haga Basin. He said, you can think about it a bit like Conan Exiles. There's multiple start points in the bottom of the map. There's, I think, 40 different places that you can spawn, and then you funnel and move upwards through the map from there. He then expanded upon what players will be doing in those first few hours. You'll be learning about water, learning about harvesting, and then building.
All right. I liked Gambit. F you. That's a PvPvE game mode. I loved it.
You build your first rudimentary base, and then because of the worm, you can't really move out from that starting region too quickly. There's too much of a distance. If you try to run across the sand, you'll get eaten by the sandworm. So your first kind of major task is to build a vehicle. At which point he said that you'll be exploring this starting section of Haga Basin, searching through dungeons, ruins, and crashed shipwrecks, looking for the resources and schematics needed for you to build your first bike, which
seems reasonable. That seems reasonable. The first few hours for any player in any game are so critical. So if the game doesn't literally grip you in that first 3 to 5 hours, you're going to lose 90% of your players. That's just because nobody's going to place because your end game is super good, right? Like, so it's got to be really good.
Basically makes this section a bit of like soft progression locking, where you have to complete this task before you have the tools needed in order to move forward and progress into the next area. Although he did clarify that this is only really going to be the case
Wait.
Seek Christ.
At release, or if you play entirely solo, because later on anyone can technically come and pick you up in their vehicle that you can use to cross the sands without having to first build your own bike. So for people,
okay, I like that. That's an aspect missing from BDO that I wish we saw more. The only feature like that in BDO is 2-seater, right? Bro, boys, get in. You know what I mean?
People jumping into the game, say a few days post-release,
cool.
if you have friends that are playing, they can literally just come and pick you right up straight away after you finish the tutorial section. You can go across the sands and then move into the rest of Haga Basin. So my next question was about how much time we can expect to be spending in this Haga Basin region. Because as we know, doing
Middle East simulator, but with cocaine. That is not funny. It's not funny. I'm not laughing. It's not funny.
Awakening is going to be divvied up into these multiple sections, which as of now, we know there is Haga Basin and then the deep...
It's spice. It's not cocaine, okay? It's a dust-filled powder that... Wait.
desert, and then the shared social hub towns. And with this question, I was really mainly curious about how much content we can expect in this region. So he said, based on what they've seen through their playtest thus far, it's roughly about 50 to 60 hours worth of content before most players leave. It's as big as Conan Exiles, he said. Haga Basin is as big as Conan Exiles. The thing that you need in order to leave is to craft your first flying vehicle, the Ornithopter. That's really what you need to get out of Haga Basin, and getting that is a journey in itself. There are multiple regions and biomes in the Haga Basin. It is quite a big area. It is as big.
Biomes? This is a desert. You got one biome. One biome. All right. You might have multiple ecosystems, but you ain't got no different biomes. All right. Biomes are like regional weather pattern. Like we're including the weather at this point. All right. Are you telling me the weather is different here than it is in the normal desert? It is literally directly adjacent. Get the out of here. The biome is sand. Now the biome...
as our other game. And just to clarify here,
Can you crash your Ornithopter? Bro, the guy just takes off. The guy just takes off and runs it straight into the wall, dude. You spend like 20 hours building this juicer flying mount. You're like, thank God, let's go straight into the wall. And you're spawning back at Haga Basin, bro. And
the prior answer and with this one, he is talking about two different things. Your first soft progression gate is the crafting of a bike to leave the southern region of Haga Basin, which is basically the starting zone outside of the tutorial. And then beyond that, there is much more Haga Basin, all of these different biomes, places to see. And in those areas is where you're going to be spending that some 50 to 60 hours of game time, leveling, crafting, building, and just progressing your way towards the construction of your flying Ornithopter, and then with that you can leave finally the Haga Basin region.
What an interesting looking, this is the first time we've seen the map. What an interesting, this must be fast travel, right? And he's just flying to the next location on the map. It breaks my immersion. I don't know. I'm partial to BDO where you have to ride everywhere. Right? And they only added the Magnus after the world got big enough, right? But like at the start, I would not expect the Dune MMO to be a tremendously wide open world. right? Like I would not, like they're talking about how big it is, but I'll be honest with you, it shouldn't really be that big at the start, right? Because they're going to do expansions and stuff. There shouldn't be any fast travel. You should have to run to get over there. Use your bike. Use the ornithopter. You got to fly around. That's what creates natural, organic, like PvP. That's how you find people. That's how you find players, and like how natural engagements actually happen. You know,
flying ornithopter.
Yeah, I want to see those biomes. Give me a break.
And then with
People over exaggerate what the word biome means. What they're really saying is ecosystem. The ecosystems are probably different.
that, you can leave finally the Haga Basin region and move into what is essentially the
Look, another desert.
end game in Dune Awakening, which is the deep desert. He also made a note here that once you get to this point where you've crafted your ornithopter, it is
So wait, where are the other biomes then? like guys, you understand that biomes are kind of like the rainforest of Brazil, right? Like it's an entire region, right? Like it's massive against like the Los Angeles desert. And like how dramatically different those two things are, because they're two different biomes in two different hemispheres. Like
just like a straight up flying mount that you would
like,
expect.
is there a rainforest? Is there an Arctic place? Okay, then there's different biomes because the weather patterns are night and day. Like
to see, and
it's like, oh no, there's different shit living there. Well, then it's just a different ecosystem. It's not a different biome.
in any MMO.
I'm a biologist.
Once
Sorry,
you have it, you can fly over much of the environment, pretty much everything.
The
And that really
Sarlacc
changes
pit?
how you approach the world. In fact, talking about this, he said, I always knew that scales of traversal would be a thing. So you start off on foot, where it feels much more intimate. Then you move to the bike. Suddenly things become faster, more accessible. But then when you get the flying mount, everything changes. Harvesting becomes a matter of just flying to the right spots and picking things up. Every time
It might get too easy. Once you get the ornithopter, it seems like it almost gets too easy. But we'll see. The way they've described it, it almost looks too easy. My concern as a biologist, guys, with a Dune MMO put in the desert, okay, is that there's not very much shit that grows in a desert. Okay, so as far as like organisms and shit to interact with goes, it's not like, oh wow, look at that crazy waterfall. No. There's nothing. It's just piles of sand, okay? For miles, because nothing can grow here. Yeah, you've got the sandworms. That's it. That's going to get old pretty quickly since you can't kill them.
time you get one of these vehicle upgrades,
I am a little concerned that that is literally the worst graphic. That's what you put in the trailer? That's garbage. That looks like shit. Look at the texture on that, bro. Like, I am concerned that there's just not going to be a whole lot to do and a whole lot to really marvel at.
changes your perception of the world, suddenly things open up. And I think his point in this comment was that they're looking to sort of draw out that experience a little bit. So you're not jumping into having a flying mount immediately and as such skipping over much of the content and the world traversal and exploration. They don't want that to happen too soon in the experience. You will have to go through these many hours of progression as you move your way through Haga Basin before you can eventually make that ornithopter and use that flying mount. Now, after that, I asked him what sort of points of interest we can expect to see. This was a big curiosity of mine. Like, what types of PvE and PvE areas and activities are we going to see? What is there going to be to do beyond walking through the desert collecting resources? So he said we have these things called shipwrecks. They are these small self-contained PvP spaces, salvage areas that are considered free-for-all where any player can attack each other. He said that as you approach a wreck, you will pass a threshold and then get a pop-up message that says this is a War of Assassins PvP area. Now,
you've entered a combat zone.
Why are you going to those shipwrecks? Well, because they're going to have some valuable resources that you want. But beyond that, he also said, we have natural world structures. We have this giant hammer of a rock called Mizrabar. It's a sacred place to the Fremen. Underneath that are different NPC outposts, different factions in the game world that have different outposts in these different areas. There's a giant chasm in the world called the Haga Rift. As you go down into it, it gets deeper and darker. And at the
They have already listed every single interesting thing in the desert. What's interesting? What interesting things can you put in a desert? A giant chasm, big ass rock, shit living below the desert. That's it. And sandstorm. Yeah, true.
this point, all of a sudden you have to think about the lighting systems down there as opposed to up top. There's an area of the world where
giant fossils, we covered it. Rock.
things have crashed and created a giant radiation zone. So you're going to need to be properly prepared survival-wise with the right gear to go into that area. So yeah, there's a lot of different biomes and spaces in the world. Now at that point, I asked him for...
Unless that cactus is going to come alive and scare the shit out of my ass like it did in BDO, I don't think the cactus is going to be super engaging content, guys.
A bit more detail about these enemy camps. I was curious, is it what I expect?
Maneuver, we covered it. Sandworms.
Are these just going to be like different compounds and installments that are full of enemies? We go in, we clear them, and we collect loot. To which he said, yes. As an example, he said that you're going to need fuel to power your shields and your bases. So you need to go run these outposts to get the fuel to keep your bases and vehicles up and running. The enemy camps actually serve the different factions, so they will each have their own unique...
This looks a lot further in development than I thought it was. This is looking like it might release next year with how finished this looks.
Individual look. He did say that you're going to go to the different camps to get you
No Man's Sky. No, it's No Man's Sky at home.
Resources that are unique to them, along with collecting the cosmetic unlocks of each of the factions. But that's not all. There's also progression unlocks that are found here. You're also going to get these things called intel points, which are what you spend in the tech tree to learn new schematics.
Why is your character so ugly? Look how well she... Oh, ah, dang.
You get these as you level up, but you can also get more of them.
That's the tech tree right there. It's looking kind of sparse, guys. Hopefully they widen that out. I mean, look, I'm not asking for Path of Exile here, but like, this is looking...
The tech tree to learn new schematics. You get these as you level up, but you can also get more of them by clearing these enemy camps. Now, I asked him about biome variety. Surprisingly enough, right? Like, yes, this is Dune. So
stop with the biome. Stop it. You know not what you're saying.
So there's mostly going to be sand everywhere, but I did get the sense in some of their early previews that they were using locations such as the Echo Labs to add a bit of visual variety to the world. And he...
Okay. That's a lab. It's important to me that you understand
locations
this is
such
not
as
a different biome. This is a lab in a desert. Okay, the desert is above the ground. All right, like we're still in a desert. We just happen to be in a lab. Now, this is pretty cool. This is a cool way to implement other shit other than just sand all the time. This is good, but how many of these are actually going to be around?
The Echo Labs to add a bit of visual variety to the world.
No,
and
it's an ecosystem under the sand. It's not a biome. It doesn't have its own weather patterns.
Pretty much concurred that that was the case. He said, yeah, the Echo Labs have this lush feeling in some of them. They're actually quite different. Some of them are like mining ecology labs where you go down and they're using mining equipment to dig deeper.
Oh God, that sounds like the Destiny 2 strikes, man. Is anyone having flashbacks to Destiny 2 right now? Where they're like, we added a new strike. No, you didn't, you stupid. You literally just took a campaign mission and then put the Cabal in it this time. Like, that's what that sounds like. It sounds like it's gonna be the same shit every time with different enemies. You know what I mean? Like, oh my God.
Down into the earth, and it's a different feel to the ones that are like this was a botany lab. But that's not all. He did say as well that in the world itself, they have areas where we have a backstory, like this area was built on top of an ecology lab, and the water systems from the Echo Lab have been running here for 10,000 years. They're sort of leaking a bit into the environment, so this part of the planet is actually slightly greener than you might expect. Now,
still the same biome though. It would cause a different ecosystem to be growing there, but you're still going to have the same weather patterns, okay? Important distinction.
Actually happy to hear that they're taking a few liberties.
Slightly greener until the sandstorm hits it and it gets obliterated. Again, it's not, guys, you can't just get life in the desert by adding a shitload of water. Okay, that's not how life works, okay? Like, if the tree is finally like, I'm here, and then gets smoked by a sandstorm, shit's dead. All right, like it's just not gonna survive. If it's like 100-degree heat during the day, bro, that shit just dead. It isn't real. See, you say that, but there's a certain amount of an MMO that has to feel real. Why was Monster Hunter World such a good game? Because the ecosystems within Monster Hunter World and the biomes, and I say biomes because there were different biomes within that game, were very real. They functioned like real life with fantasy aspects, right? Of course it's not real life, right? But it felt like it could plausibly, you have like all of the different monsters interacting with each other. There's clearly a food chain, right? There's a water supply, right? There's trackable events that are going on, right? So like you can trace where they're going to be getting food, where they're going to be getting water, right? Like this is predictable events and stuff like this. It's realistic in this regard, right? And when you're making ecosystems and you're designing a world, it's very important that the world actually looks reasonably realistic, or it's going to feel wrong, right? For example, there can't just be like rivers going nowhere for no reason, right? Even in Black Desert, you see this river right here running through the middle of the world, but where is it running to? Right? It's running down to another body of water. Okay? Right? The rivers cut through the landscape properly, right? It looks normal, right? You also have hot springs and stuff springing up in Mountain of Eternal Winter. You see springs coming directly out of the mountainside, and that's like right here. Comes directly out of the mountainside, and it flows into a major river basin, which would eventually connect with a lake, right? Like this is all like super normal stuff that helps it make the landscape feel more realistic, even though you're in a fantasy setting.
Here, it's not going to be 100% sand 100% of the places. They're going to mix it up a bit, although he did at the end point out by saying like, yes, at the end of the day, if you hate deserts, then I don't think this game is going to be for you, which of course
we love deserts. Right, guys? Fortunately for them, we are big fans of deserts. Bigger, blacker deserts. We love sand. We're the opposite of Anakin Skywalker.
to make sense. It is Dune. It is going to be mostly desert. And honestly, it kind of feels like no matter what they did here in terms of adding biome variety or not adding it, they would be...
How much of Black Desert is actually a desert, though? Actually, a tremendous amount. Here's the green part of the world. Here's like the water, right? This is Land of the Morning Light. Look how big the desert is, guys. Look how big this is. And like, this is desert too. This is all desert right here too. This is massive. Okay. This is even bigger. This is fucking huge. And it looks like it continues up here, right? Massive amounts of desert here. Obviously, it's a smaller part of the whole world, but like, yeah, it's pretty big.
Dealing with some complaints, right? Although he did add that in the Dune universe itself, it does allow for some of this already. He said there are things on the planet that we'll do in the future, in future updates, like they have the polar caps. There are ice caps.
Polar caps, ice caps, that's a different biome. Perfect.
In Dune,
you're going to have different weather patterns.
It is mentioned in the books. It's part of the lore. They have a tundra area. They have this line that the worms can't cross because it's too much moisture. But we wanted to capture the central Dune fantasy first before we started working on those other areas. Pretty much like lightly confirms like, hey, there's going to be the snow expansion update as we move into the tundra and the like polar ice cap areas, right? That probably a safe bet that might happen in the future if they continue supporting this game, right? We're just throwing that out there. Now, my next question was about endgame. I asked him if they have anything that we would consider endgame, things like group-focused PvE activities. Here's the answer that I got. He said it's going to depend whether it's a PvP activity or not. So the Deep Desert has the big spice blows, and it's really a PvE activity to harvest spice. So you want to have a coordinated group, you want to be flying a transport ornithopter.
Man, that's where I want the PvP to be, man.
Carrying a sandcrawler, you want scouts, you want people riding point with sand bikes to be dumping out thumpers to keep the sandworm away from you. We do actually really talk about it in terms of raids. He was talking about how the internal team discusses harvesting spice. He said that they say, these are the raids in our game. The boss is the sandworm, except instead of fighting it, you're trying to keep them away. While you're keeping them away, you're also harvesting spice out in the desert. And so that's the kind of coordinating.
So it is a PvP zone. It is a PvP zone. Guys, we're huge. We're huge. Anybody else looking at this like it's some Sea of Thieves shit? Let them do all the hard work trying to harvest the spice and then come in and just out PvP them because they're terrible PvE lord shitheads. Yeah, you're terrible at the game. This is my spice. Thanks for doing all the hard work for us.
PvE activity. The thing is, though, that this area is a PvP zone, so another guild can show up, and then you have to make those kind of decisions. Are we staying here to defend our harvesting area, or are we moving somewhere else?
Yeah, I like
the activity itself, though, is designed as PvE, but the fact that you're in a zone where that threat can happen means that it can also quickly turn into PvP.
Perfect.
So I followed up by asking if they would have any of what I would consider more traditional group-focused PvE content. Like, are they going to have any large-scale, elaborate enemy compounds, for example, with things like...
I'm just going to keep it a buck, guys. With the PvE content that they've already mentioned, let's be honest, they already have more PvE content than BDO does. Like
a traditional, hey, here's a very large, heavily armored boss of sorts at the end. You go in, you clear it for loot, stuff like that. His response was, there will be some of that stuff post-launch. It's not part of the main plan for launch, just because we wanted to focus on getting the deep desert right, having the recurring cycles and all of that. There is a plan, however, to ship some of that stuff post-launch. That is definitely down the alley. Like, you raid a base to turn off anti-aircraft missiles to gain access to certain resources that you need.
Okay.
That's something in the plans for the future that's concretely on.
Already planning raids with confirmed raids couldn't be Perlibus. That's all I'm gonna say.
On the table.
Couldn't be Perlibus.
If it wasn't already clear beyond the survival crafting elements of the game, yes, like there will be PvE activities in things like the enemy camps and
it sounds like the end game is gonna be primarily PvP, guys.
Going into the Echo Labs. But the main driving factor in this game, especially come the end game and the deep desert, it's that PvP conflict. So I did have a few questions about PvP itself. I asked about that PvE scenario that he mentioned, okay? So your guild is out in the deep desert, you're harvesting spice together, and then all of a sudden it turns into PvP when another guild shows up. So then my follow-up question was, so another guild shows up, what is that process like? And can 6 other guilds show up? His answer was yes. The desert is fully open.
Yes, dude. Where you're like, yeah, baby, we're totally gonna get this. They did all the work for the... Why the is there another guild here? Like, Cloud Fiesta. Total Cloud Fiesta.
PvP. However many players decide to go to a single location, that is the number of players that you're going to see. However, he did add, you might hit a technical cap. It depends on our server optimization for launch, just to be clear. So I don't know how many players are going to be per server. Like, we gave some numbers, like we'll have a minimum of 40 people in the Haga Basin. We should have more than that in the deep desert.
The base thing to do is to take their little spice mining like area and then just destroy all the thumpers and let the sandworm kill everybody, and then come in and take the spice. It ain't easy being cheesy, boys.
Per server instance, and the server instances are chained together, sort of like server meshing that you've seen a lot of games talking about lately. The deep desert, though, is one seamless set of servers chained together, which means it supports a lot more players. If 6 guilds show up and they're 100 players each, I'm not sure we can support 6.
Obviously, that's obvious. Hopefully the servers are at least good enough.
600 people in 1 square kilometer. That might not work. So with him saying that, I responded by asking, how would this
action combat, tab target, or hybrid? What is it? What is it? Is it action? What is it?
Be surfaced to players, right? So if like 6 guilds all showed up at a single area to fight over the spice blow, do some portion of them get instanced out of that area? Are they going to be phased and not see each other? But his answer was interesting. He said no. What'll likely happen is as we grow closer to a soft cap, there will be some natural things that occur. For example,
it looks like it's going to be more action combat based. I'll be honest. This does not look like it's a super tab target intensive system. It also looks like the PvP or like the player interactions in the game focus much more on your character. You're not talking about like grinding mobs necessarily for thousands of hours. You're talking about discovery. And then like, so I think it could be action combat. That might be on some hopium, but like...
sandstorms will come in to drive players away from the area. However, if people insist we're just going to throw up a hard barrier, we have this lore police force in place that can drop hard barriers around specific areas. So basically, this is pretty much what's going to happen whenever Asmongold decides to go anywhere in the deep desert. They're probably going to be having these police forces dropping these barriers.
And we will be running those down. Am I right, boys? If they try to block Asmon's road, we We get together and we just drive it through, bro. We get that spice. Are you telling me that Asmon is not going to want to PvP the other guilds, like Big Dick It, as he says? Are you telling me Asmon's not going to want to get the f out? He's going to be like, guys, let him through. Let's fight this out. And then he's going to Zergus, okay, with thousands of players. It'll be fun.
Years to cordon people off, right? What's interesting here, though, is learning that they actually do intend for the Deep Desert to be fully open, uninstanced, and no phasing. They're using this server meshing technology to make it so that if you and 100 other people all decide to go to a single area, this say one spice blow or one enemy base that's out in the desert,
Can we please not call it a spice blow? It just adds more evidence to the fact that it's very likely just cocaine, but red. Okay, like I didn't really realize why people were calling it cocaine before. Now I'm starting to get it.
should all see each other at that area at the same time, up until they hit this server issues with player caps within that square kilometer region. And at that point, they're going to start throwing in sandstorms to force people out, or if that doesn't work, dropping those police barriers if things get even crazier. But there is no phasing. There are no 100 different instances of one particular area. If you and 100 or 200 people all want to go to one spot and stand on one grain of sand, you'll be able to do it up until the
That sounds like some bullshit, but we'll see.
Server threshold issues, and then they're going to do things to mitigate that. But there's no phasing. There's not going to be, I'm standing on this grain of sand and my friend is standing on that grain of sand, but we don't see each other because we're in different phases. That is not something they're going to do, which is really, really interesting. I'm really interested to see how this plays out. And if it...
We don't see server meshing too much from what I'm understanding in the current MMOs genre. So like this is kind of like the first time we've seen
isn't just a total laggy
implemented
mess,
on
right?
like a larger scale.
He added as well, though, that the Deep Desert is quite massive. He said it's like 9 times the size of Haga Basin, which, mind you, he said Haga Basin was larger than their other game, Conan Exiles, and that's a pretty big game. It is huge. That's the other side of it. It's what you see in the movies. It's a big expanse of sand and only a few rock islands. There's definitely meeting points on those islands, but it is 15 minutes to fly across. It takes quite a while to get from one end to another. But back to the PvE and PvP discussion, he continued. The point is that if you're a smaller guild and you don't want to fight people for spice, you can still be out there doing that PvE harvesting and sort of just run away. The idea is that the space works to the advantage of the players, and it also means that people who don't really like PvP, which he said is a lot of people, and he's well aware of that, it means that if you feel like it, you can dip your toe into this activity and be on your ornithopter and fly away. If you see 6 guilds coming towards you, you'll be able to get away. You'll have those.
You can totally just run away and get absolutely no rewards. You can do that. That was kind of based.
Sightlines. He then added that they really want to avoid the typical issue that open world PvP survival games have. He said, in survival games, what I see with PvP, just take Conan Exiles for example, is it's never 10 versus 10. It's always like 8 versus 1, or like 30 people come over a hill and there's 5 guys harvesting alone, and then those 30 people just charge and they have a great time, but the 5...
True. You're like, oh, hey, we were just getting this spice ready for you because there's a lot more of you than there are of us. We're gonna head out.
People don't. We're trying to make it so that the 5 people feel like it's worth their time to get out of there. If they want to, they can just pick up and get away if
Respect
necessary.
the 1v1,
but yes,
no
when it
such
comes
thing.
to the Deep Desert, it is just full-on PvP 100% of the time. It's going to turn into Zergfest, but they're going to have systems in place to try to mitigate too many people being too overwhelming on the servers in one particular location using that server meshing technology that they have. But yeah, it is the case that like if you're trying to harvest spice and 6, 7, 8 other guilds show up to push you out of there, they'll be able to push you out of there. You could choose to say, but it's probably not going to go too well for you. And there are things like vehicle destruction. There isn't full corpse looting, but there is things like resource loss.
So I can fly my ornithopter into the wall, man. Like I could just see it now. My dad's going to be like, you're in the middle of a desert. How did you even hit anything? It's just dunes. How did you wreck this goddamn thing? It's just like high school.
So all of this stuff you're going to have to keep in consideration. Now, a lot of that was really focused on the PvP in the deep desert, but there is also limited PvP that will be happening in the Haga Basin as well. He said it's primarily happening around the crash ships that were mentioned earlier. So the way this will work is you will see ships falling from the sky. It'll happen in real time, and then players will run to those areas because there are valuable resources to collect. However, within that proximity around the ship in that immediate area, it is full on PvP, so you'll have to keep your head on the swivel if you're going.
These seem like PvP on public events from Destiny 2.
And trying to grab resources and then run away. Also, he mentioned that some select faction bases, those like enemy camps, those can be PvP flagged as well. Not all of them, but there will be a select few. Now, another interesting mechanic in this game that I was curious about are those massive storms that reset the play space, specifically the deep desert. So I asked about that. So the deep desert, he said, has the Coriolis storm that happens every week. It wipes everything, absolutely everything, and changes the landscape. So what was there last week will be different.
Nakatsu, thanks for the raid, sister. Really appreciate that. Thank you. We're just taking a look at this Dune MMO here.
This week. The sand comes in, it wipes everything, and then there's all of a sudden a new ecology lab that you hadn't seen before, or a new shipwreck. There's also new islands, and they're in different places. So you need to go in, you need to reestablish your logistics and resurvey the area to figure out where things are. In the deep desert, you'll get things like items that are only there for that week, and you don't know when they're going to show up next. One specific eco lab might only be there once every 2 months, and for that week, you can go there to get this schematic to craft a unique rifle, and you're the only person that can craft it because you're the only person who found that schematic at that.
Okay. So it's like Whisper of the Worm, but like I'm the only one that's got it.
Eco lab, and then once it goes away the next week, all of a sudden you could have the super rare resource that no one could get a new one of, and you could sell it on the auction house. You could craft the item and sell it. You'll have a lot of options, or you can just craft it and make it for yourself and your mates. And his mentioning of these unique schematics also had me curious about how gearing works in the game and what the focus is going to be. So I asked him if the main gear hunt is focused on the schematics that you then craft, or am I going to be also finding
you have no idea
rifles in the desert? He said, yeah, definitely. It's definitely more about schematics. In WoW, you roll for the loot itself, right? Well, in our game, you get the schematic and then you have to craft it, but that also adds value to you in a few ways because you can then sell it in the auction house. We don't have any sort of bind on pickup. And because this is a survival crafting game, I asked if they're going to have some of what I consider the more important quality of life features in this genre. Specifically, will they have crafting from storage? Will they have auto sort? Will they have deposit similar items when moving from your inventory to chest? And he said yes to all three of those. Thank you so much.
Oh, that's good. Yeah, that's great and everything. But all that stuff that can be changed after the fact. They have not told us anything about the PvP system of the game. They have told us that there is going to be PvP and there is PvE, obviously like some like life skill shit. But like action combat or tab target, just give it to me straight.
So much. Now, the final thing I asked him was to basically walk us through what are considered their dungeons, what they have called their dungeons, which are these eco labs. They're going to be scattered all around the environment. They're going to have like different settings and themings and locations. And he made it clear to me when talking about this that it isn't like a traditional MMO dungeon, like these 5 players instance things with really challenging boss fights with tons of different phases at the end, but rather it's much more akin to like a Bethesda dungeon. Think sort of along the lines of Fallout or Skyrim or even Starfield. These will be instance locations with set themings and backstories that you discover.
So they're going to be garbage. I'm sorry. I did not like Skyrim dungeons. I did not like Fallout dungeons. I didn't like any. I had a bad experience with Fallout though. I played Fallout 76. Y'all have no idea. I went through it.
To explore them. So you'll be going through these corridors. You'll come across small groups of enemies, but
yeah, every Skyrim dungeon was, I don't know what that last word was, but they all felt the same to me. That was the problem with the Skyrim dungeons.
More so, there will be
like they all just feel exactly the same when they're computer generated like this, which is exactly what it looks like.
Text and lore bits like leftover audio.
How do I say this? They're like the lost sectors in Destiny. Annoying
logs or something that you'll interact with and will tell you a bit of story about the area, and then as you progress you find more audio logs, you find more clues about what happened in this region, why it's abandoned, what was going on here, and eventually you might have a boss at the end, but it's going to be, instead of like a normal enemy that might take like 5 seconds to take out, it might take like 15 seconds to take out the more souped up.
Oh my god, it really is just a lost sector, bro. It's like legit, bro. Like, oh god, no. Like, I hated grinding those, man.
Version at the end. But yeah, the way he was describing it about exploring and uncovering lore about that particular area and its history and its previous inhabitants or what they were doing there, you discover more and more as you progress. It really, as he was sharing it with me, it reminded me so much of like going through a cavern in Skyrim or a location in a Fallout game or in Starfield. It sounded very, very reminiscent of it. In fact, he said himself as they're developing it, something like Fallout's vaults is sort of what they had in their mind. It sounded actually pretty neat. Now, I would love more traditional like group focused dungeons with hard bosses.
I really want to experience group focused raid content. I really want that. I've never gotten that in my life aside from like the 6-man Destiny raids, and like that is it, man. Like I've never gotten to do like the big large scale raids like you see in WoW or Final Fantasy, like
and things like that for the loot hunt. But I think these Echo Labs that they have in the game,
I played Warlock in Destiny,
also sound interesting for what they are. And again, I really think ultimately it's important to keep in mind, it's pretty clear this is first and foremost a survival crafting building game and exploration with a big focus on PvP at the end and some PvE, but the PvE group stuff, the things like raids or the group instance dungeons, that's not really a main focus, at least not as of yet. Maybe that changes a bit in the future. But that just about does it for my interview with Joel. All in all, I thought it was a productive chat. I learned a lot of new things about the game, and I have now a much better picture of what it's going to be like to play. Unfortunately, he didn't give me any insider tips as to when we can play test the game, so I'm just going to continue hoping it's sometime soon. I do know that they are doing testing right now currently, but it's like strictly NDA, really small scale. I think you can
I will take this bullet. I will test it and not say anything. Just let me see.
Register for a chance to be invited. But in terms of like larger stuff like open beta weekends, I have no idea. I would love to get my hands on the game like this fall or winter or something, but we will.
To be clear, they've got like, they're showing in-game footage. Normally you don't do that till you're really far through development. So like realistically, we could be seeing it in 2025, guys. Like, or at the earliest first quarter of 2025. But like realistically end of 2025, in my opinion. But we'll see. Here's the video right here. I'm very excited for this. I think this looks really, really good. I'm tentatively getting my hopes up for it because let's be honest, most games that are based off of movies are terrible. But it looks like they've really put the effort into this. I'm hoping it's not terrible. I just want it to be like solidly good. That's what I'm not. It doesn't look like it's going to blow us out of the waters based on the graphics and stuff, but like I'm waiting to see what the combat and stuff looks like.